Hey traders, welcome back to the weekly Forex Forecast. Last week we had a number of news events coming out and I'm going to show you in today's video how those news events from last week set up a number of the best markets heading into this week. If we look at the scorecards, you can see that the US dollar is the #1 long idea heading into next week. It's my favorite play next week. And last week we had FOMC and it was a hawkish pause. Why was it a hawkish pause? Because although they didn't raise rates last week, and we're talking about the Federal Reserve here, 12 FOMC members signaled that they do want another rate hike this year, as opposed to 7 who signaled that they don't. So this is why it was considered a hawkish pause. It was supportive of the dollar, and I am looking for that to play out again coming into this week with long dollar setups. The other currency going into next week, which I really like to the long side, is the Canadian dollar. This has been supported by a stronger crude oil price, which is still the case, and last week we had hotter than expected inflation data coming out of Canada, and I'm looking for that to follow through into this week with some strength and some bullish setups in the Canadian dollar pairs. To the short side, my favorite short heading into next week is the pound. We had the double whammy last week of inflation coming out softer than expected and the Bank of England failing to hike as expected. I do think this, once again, like with the other markets, is going to feed through into this week, and it's my favorite short heading into this week. Another short I like heading into next week is the Swiss franc. Now, although the Swiss franc with an absolute score is neutral, as opposed to some of the other currencies here which are actually negative or bearish, I do like Swiss franc shorts going into next week. Why? Because it has come out of the positive side of the scorecards and it does have negative momentum. And we also had the SNB last week failing to raise rates, very much like the Bank of England. And this is bearish for the Swiss franc. And I do think we could continue to see coming into this week Swiss franc weakness off of the back of that. So the pound and the Swiss franc next week are my two favorite shorts versus the Canadian dollar and the US dollar. And again, it's not just the scores here. We also have those catalysts, those bearish catalysts from the news events last week with those two currencies in the pound and the Swiss franc. And the final currency I do like to the downside next week is the Japanese yen. It does have some bullish momentum in the scorecards. However, it does have the weakest absolute score. And we also had the BOJ on Friday, who really underwhelmed markets. They came out, it was basically a non-event. And I do think this is now going to see the Japanese yen back down to its lows. And as a result, I do also like yen shorts head into next week. Okay, so let's have a look at the markets for the coming weeks, starting with crude oil. I do still like bullish setups in crude oil overall. It is becoming overextended. However, I do still favor bullish setups. So any pullback in this market is viewed as an opportunity intra-week to look for bullish breakouts into the 94.75 area. And the second place I'll be looking for a potential long opportunity in crude oil is if we trade into the 87 area. This is the second place next week. I'll be looking for a short-term buy opportunity in crude oil. Next is pound dollar. Now this is my favorite market heading into next week, and this was actually an opportunity highlighted to the downside in last week's video, and we traded right into the profit taking zone down here at the 1.2250. So a really nice move down in pound dollar. Coming into this week, any pullback in this area is viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish breakouts down towards the 1.2100. And if we pull back and we test, and you can see it's right on the underside as well of this short consolidation here, if we test the 1.2375 area, this is the second place next week. I would be looking for a short-term sell opportunity in pound dollar. Going into next week, I can either be short pound dollar or do nothing. Buying this market is not an option for me. Next is US dollar Swiss franc. You can see the sharp move up that we had once we saw the SNB failing to raise rates as expected. And I do believe this momentum is going to continue into next week. I'm looking for a pullback first. I'd like to see this correct. Any correction is viewed as an opportunity to start to look for bullish breakouts up towards the 0.9160. And the second place I'd be looking for a buy opportunity next week, and very similar to pound dollar here, but just the other way around. You can see this is the top of this previous consolidation. It's the 0.8980. This is where I'd be looking for a short-term buy opportunity if we can pull back here next week in US dollar Swiss franc. Next is US dollar Japanese yen. Now we've pretty much been consolidated. You can see we've been pushing higher, but we're struggling to break the highs over here. And going into next week, I do like US dollar yen to the upside, especially with the BOJ underwhelming at the end of last week, contrary to that hawkish pause we saw out of the Federal Reserve. So any consolidation next week is viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish breakouts in this market up towards the 150.50. And if we can pull back next week instead, and instead of just breaking out of this trend, you can see, you can draw a trend line on at the beginning of the week. And if you fail to break, if it just bounces and keeps bouncing and pulls back into the 146, this is second place next week. I'd be looking for a short-term buy opportunity in US dollar yen. And the final dollar pair heading into next week here, I have highlighted is euro dollar. Not highlighted in gold because I prefer these three markets here. But I also like euro shorts. We did note in last week's video, not last week, but the week before, that the ECB, yes, they raised rates, but the market saw this as being the end of the hiking cycle, which was inherently bearish and negative for the euro. And I do think, especially as we've got a strong dollar and the euro is 57% of the dollar index, I do think we are going to see further downside over the coming weeks in euro dollar. So any consolidation or pullback is viewed as the opportunity to look for a bearish breakout intra-week down to the 1.0540. And if we fail to break out and we just bounce and we keep bouncing like this into the 1.0760, and you can see there's a high over here, we could retest this as resistance as well. This would be the second place next week. I'd be looking for a potential short in euro dollar. Next is pound CAD. This was another top market like pound dollar, highlighted to the downside last week, and we did take out the profit taking zone. We actually broke through there, so a really strong move to the downside last week in this market. Coming into this week, I can either sell this market or do nothing. Buying this is not an option, so any pullback in this market is viewed as an opportunity to start to look for bearish breakouts intra-week down to the 1.6350. And if we pull back all the way into, and there's a previous high over here, into the 1.66750 area, this is the second place next week. I'd be looking for a short-term sell opportunity in pound CAD. Next is CAD franc. Again, you can see the momentum to the upside here when the SNB failed to raise rates as expected. So any pullback in this market, I am looking for the opportunity to be long next week. That would either be in the form of a breakout intra-week, looking for a move into the 0.680, or if we hold the trend and this pulls all the way back, instead of breaking out, we bounce and we pull back all the way into the 0.6660. This is the second place next week. I'd be looking for a short-term buy opportunity in CAD franc. Next is CAD yen. We've had quite a strong move up. You can see this correction here, this consolidation, and then we break out of this. It's actually forming somewhat of an ascending triangle because you can see the higher lows down here in this kind of flat top. We break out with momentum, and now we've kind of entered into this consolidation. So any continued consolidation is viewed as the opportunity to look for bullish breakouts next week into the 1150 area. And like previous markets, if we fail to break out and we just bounce from this trend line, we trend all the way down into the 108.50. This is the second place I'd be looking for a short-term buy opportunity in CAD yen. And last but not least, we have EurCad, highlighted to the downside last week, and we traded right into the max profit taking zone. So another really nice market from last week's video. Coming into this week, any pullback in this market is simply viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish breakouts down towards the 1.4220 area. And again, if we fail to break out and we just bounce and we hold this trend all the way back to the 1.4480, this is the second place next week. I'd be looking for a short-term sell opportunity in EurCad. Okay, so wrapping up the video with gold and silver. Starting with gold, I do favor shorts in both these markets because of the strength of the dollar. It is a headwind, and both of these, generally speaking, are kind of neutral as it currently stands, but I favor shorts nonetheless in both of these because of the strength of the dollar. So any pullback in gold next week is viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish breakouts intra-week down to the previous low down here and onto the 1895 area. And if we fail to break out, as with the other markets, and we just hold this trend all the way up next week, and we trade into the 1955 area, and I do like this high over here. If we come up and we test this high within the 1955 area, this would be a great place to start to look for a short-term sell opportunity in gold next week. And finally, we have silver. Last week, this was a market I highlighted I was only interested in looking for short opportunities. And we pulled back and tested the 2380, highlighting last week's video. And this was an area I did say to you, I'd be looking for potential short opportunity. And look at how this sold off from here. This may continue to sell off heading into next week as we've tested this level already. However, I do favor shorts once again in silver heading into this week. So any continued pullback is viewed as the opportunity to look for an intra-week breakout to the downside. I'm going to be looking down towards the prior low over here at the 2280. And if we bounce and we just continue to trend all the way back to the 2440 and we have this area over here where you can see we've got resistance and support testing each other, this would be a great place next week, that the second place in fact that I personally will be looking for a short-term sell opportunity in silver. So that is it from me for this week, guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, why not consider joining us in the room each day where I go through these markets and the setups that I'm personally looking at with members on a daily basis for over 75 markets in different asset classes, including stocks, bonds, Forex, and commodities.